Assalamu alaikum, family. Welcome to the Sajdah channel and welcome to part 3 of our series on separation that is designed to make us think, to help us review history, and to strategically plan. And today we're going to be talking about forced sales and land loss. So be a friend and tell a friend, and we'll be right back after a few short commercial breaks and a beautiful prayer.
O Allah, guide me among those whom Thou hast guided aright, and preserve me among those whom Thou hast preserved, and befriend me among those whom Thou hast befriended. Bless me in whatsoever Thou dost grant me, and deliver me from the evil of what Thou hast judged. Surely Thou judgest, and none can judge against Thee. And he whom Thou befriendest is not disgraced. Blessed art Thou, O Lord, and exalted be Thee above what they set up besides Thee. I bear witness, nothing deserves to be served besides Thee, and I bear witness that Muhammad is Thy servant and apostle. Amen.
Welcome to day 3. Assalamu alaikum. This is day 3 of my series on separation, Black settlements, and all the strategic planning that we have to begin to do around that. Again, assalamu alaikum, which simply means peace be unto you. Wishing each and every one of you peace and love. Thank you for tuning in. I know you have so many things to do, and I appreciate that you show love and support. I'm your host, Sajdah Wendy Muhammad. We're going to jump right in today. Few quick announcements. Go to ElijahMuhammadHouse.com and sign up for losing my words this morning. Sign up for the Black Muslim Ice Cream Social. We're going to be doing some networking, getting an opportunity to get to know each other. Our goal is to make sure that our dollar begins to circulate in our community longer than 6 hours. It's pretty pathetic. And then I don't even want to think about how long it circulates in the Black Muslim community. I hate to think that. Anyway, so we're going to do that. That's June 26th, 6 to 8 p.m. Make sure you come out, bring your business cards, be ready, have your elevator pitch together. I'm going to do a show right before with the group, and we're going to talk a little bit about how to network, because a lot of us don't really even know how. We come to an event like that and we're like, well, what am I supposed to do? What am I supposed to say? Blah, blah, blah. So we're going to talk about that. Having your elevator pitch, knowing how to present your business, present who you are, introduce yourself properly so that you're meeting like-minded people that you can do business with, and you can be one of their customers, and then they can become one of your customers. That's our goal. And then what else we got going on? Sunday, 7 p.m. Central Time is week 4, the last week of the Money Psychology series. We're going to be talking about mindset again. We're going to do a recap on that. We're going to go in deep dive once again. And so you'll see that. I hope that after this series, you walk away with a little bit more certainty around how you need to be thinking when it comes to money. All right. Okay, so let's get into this. This series, like I said, on separation, on Black settlements, I want to give us a historical overview so that'll encourage us to start learning, to start studying. And this series, in fact, about it, my whole network, my channel, it's not for everybody. You got to be a do-for-selfer. You got to be a builder. If you can't build, you can't really chill with me, because this is a building network that I like fostering. So it's not for everybody. But if you're a builder, if you're a developer, if you want to lead, if you want to govern, if you want to open up businesses, this is the network for you. All right. So let's talk about these more than 1,200 historically Black towns. I explain this in every show, but I got to have this same opening because it helps us tie these topics together. Okay. So bear with me if you heard this yesterday and the day before. Okay. More than 1,200 historically Black towns were founded during the years of Reconstruction and at the end of the 19th century, continuing into the early 20th century. But several were established long before the Civil War. Historic Black towns, both incorporated and unincorporated, can be understood as settlements that are predominantly inhabited and governed by Black people and were established to create safe and autonomous communities amidst widespread racial discrimination and violence. From coast to coast and in each pocket of the United States, Black entrepreneurs, farmers, and professionals broke ground in new locations throughout Florida, California, Oklahoma, Texas, and beyond. In places like Oklahoma, for example, where there were 50 towns, Black towns in this city alone during Reconstruction. So not only was there Black Wall Street, but there more than that. There were 50 Black towns. So Oklahoma, Texas, Florida, California, and beyond. For example, in Oklahoma, Black families and individuals thrived economically and politically without the violent oversight and control of white supremacist culture and policies. The dramatic loss of towns and settlements was far from accidental. A host of systemic challenges and mechanisms of disposition have enabled the erasure of these spaces. Now, I want us to begin to think about how we prevent these tactics and how we strategically plan and how we move forward when we start talking about separation. Okay. By 1910, Black Americans owned 15 million acres of farmland. By 1997, only 2.3 million acres remained in our hands. Over 90% of that land loss is tied to legal loopholes, not just market factors. I probably should say that again. By 1910, Black Americans owned 15 million acres of land. By 1997, only 2.3 million acres remain. Over 90% of that land loss is tied to legal loopholes and not just market factors. Okay? So today we will discuss how the property tax and legal system exploited Black land ownership during Reconstruction. After the Civil War, many freed Black Americans acquired land through purchase, informal agreements, redistribution. However, the legal and property tax systems in the South and North, but primarily in the South, were used to dispossess them, many of them. So before we discuss this, let's begin with point number 12, point number 4, we should begin with point number 12, but let's begin with point number 4 for the purposes of this discussion, given to us by the Honorable Elijah Muhammad, of what the Muslims want. And it says this: we want our people in America whose parents or grandparents were descendants from slaves to be allowed to establish a separate territory or state of their own, either on this continent or elsewhere. We believe that our former slave masters are obligated to provide such land and that the area must be fertile and minerally rich. We believe that our former slave masters are obligated to maintain and supply our needs in this separate territory for the next 20 to 25 years until we are able to produce and supply our own needs. In a much talked about interview, the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan appeared on Meet the Press, NBC Television's Meet the Press on April 13, 1997. He was interviewed by Tim Russert and David Broder. And this subject of separation came up. And here's some of the dialogue. In preparing for this interview, I read the literature that your organization puts out and publishes, and I'd like to go through it to find out what you believe and how it affects America. This is your newspaper, The Final Call, and he holds up The Final Call newspaper, which comes out once a month, and on the back page, and the minister interrupts him and says once a week, and then Tim Russert goes on, he says, okay, once a week on the back page of the Muslim program, what the Muslims want. And if I go through a few of these, let me put one on the screen. He puts point number 4 that I just read on the screen and get your reaction. The first is in terms of territory, and you'll see, quote, since we cannot get along with them in peace and equality, we believe our contributions to this land and the suffering forced upon us by white America justifies our demand for complete separation in a state or territory of our own, close quote. Is that your view in 1997? A separate state for Black Americans? And the minister so eloquently responds, quote, first, the program starts with number 1. That is number 4. The first part of that program is that we want freedom, a full and complete freedom. The second is we want justice. We want equal justice under the law. And we want justice applied equally to all, regardless of race or class or color. And the third is that we want equality. We want equal membership in society with the best in civilized society. If we can get that within the political, economic, social system of America, there's no need for point number 4. But if we cannot get along in peace after giving America 400 plus years of service and sweat and labor, then of course separation would be the solution to our race problem. That's where we are today. Now, again, like I said, the Sajdah channel, the work that I do around Black entrepreneurships, being a builder and developer is not for everyone. So you're not going to see droves of people flocking to this subject. So if you're a follower or you're a person who's into groupthink and you're waiting for everybody else to latch on to this subject, then this ain't for you in the first place. This is for builders, developers, people who are ready to do for self, people who are ready to govern themselves. Okay. And we realize that everybody's not in that number, and it's okay. All right. Because this concept of separation bothers a lot of people, both Black and white. Some view this concept as an extreme overreach, and many are downright afraid to even think of this subject. I want to ease you into the concept because this concept of separation was performed numerous times during Reconstruction, except absent a protected military, had many of those towns sustained, we would be having a different conversation today. How do we avoid the repeat of history that led to the destruction of our towns? What happened and what are the signs? And how do we strategically plan today? And what's the separation landscape look like today? Now, some of us may separate by being pioneers and building brand new towns and settlements from scratch. All right. This historical look back that we're doing this week is for you to use a strategy when you are planning and developing. Others of us are already separated after finding ourselves in towns and suburbs of major cities where all the people that look like us have left. Well, let me say it this way. All the people who don't look like us have left, and we are left to govern and take care of ourselves. This historical look back is for you too, because you now quickly have to learn how to govern and to protect and improve upon what already exists. Okay. And the program, the strategies given to us by the Honorable Elijah Muhammad can be used by you in those situations as well. That's two different forms of separation. Others of us will be forced to separate because we just can't get our morals together. So we may end up in our little predatory towns by ourselves. See, none of this works if we don't work on ourselves. Let me just say that. The self-improvement process is for everybody. And then some of us are here watching the show saying, well, I like being the only Black person in my town or neighborhood. I like the exclusivity. It makes me feel like I've arrived. I can't live around niggas and I'm better than the average Black person. Okay, well, this is for you too. These universal principles taught to us by the Honorable Elijah Muhammad are rooted in creating a civilized society. And we should be the vanguards of the development of that civilized society, no matter where we go, no matter what form of separation we find ourselves in right now, today, or tomorrow. And since we have all taken on the mind and behaviors of Satan in some form or another, we all must begin a self-improvement process, and we all must learn the principles of freedom, justice, and equality. So, how the property tax and legal system exploited Black land ownership during Reconstruction. Let's break this down. One of the first ways is through what we call heirs property. Heirs, Heirs, heirs property. Okay. Legal loopholes. Black families in the South and across the U.S. lost property with alarming frequency due to legal loopholes, discriminatory laws, and systemic racism. Y'all know those numbers I gave where there were 15 million acres of land in 1910 and somewhere around 2 million not too long ago? Guess what? Almost every person who can hear the sound of my voice, or that we know, has some land or knows some people down south who lost their land or their land was stolen from them. There's too many stories like that in our community. I know we got them in our family. See, exact numbers are hard to determine due to poor documentation, historical studies, and investigative reports. But what we do know is that this created massive intergenerational wealth lost for Black people. We lost our land, millions of acres of it, either because we weren't educated on how to keep it, we weren't educated on how to properly acquire it, or if the person who owned it died, then there was a problem with the heirs taking over the land. See, without formal title, land is vulnerable to partition or forced sale if any heir decides to sell or is manipulated into selling. A lot of people, a lot of that land, a lot of those 15 million acres, some people were given those plots of land from their former slave masters or during sharecropping days. Some people settled on areas and just went and claimed aspects of land. Some places, they bought the land legitimately, but it was just taken from them through some of these means that we're going to talk about today. Okay. There were things like partition. So the heirs, passing things down to heirs was a problem. There were things called partition sales, or what they call a legal dispossession. And under partition law, any co-owner, including an outside investor, can force a sale of the entire property, often led to court-ordered auctions with land sold far below market value. Wealthy white land speculators exploited this by buying interest from one heir and then forcing a sale. Families were often unaware of proceedings or lacked resources to contest them. So many stories I've heard about this, where the person who owned the land or bought the land originally passed away. They left it. Let's say they have 5 children. And then of the 5 children, 3 of them wanted to sell. And a lot of times what we didn't know is that maybe 2 or 3 of them, or the majority of them, had created partnerships with local wealthy landowners because they thought either that it would help them develop, or sometimes they just did it because they just got suckered into it. And then when it came down to the vote, they didn't have a majority vote. And whoever either had the most power, the most influence, or the most money got the land. This has been part of what's been complicating land ownership, especially with our folks down south, forever. It happened up north, but I think there's so many more of us that can give examples of how this thing went down. Some of y'all here in the show, in the chat, how this went down south. There's another way they do it. It's called property tax exploitation. So counties imposed high property taxes on Black landowners. Failure to pay even minor or unnoticed tax bills triggered tax lien sales. Often landowners weren't notified properly, or the notices were buried in inaccessible public records. Land was sold at public auctions to speculators or white neighbors, frequently without the landowner's knowledge. Sometimes they would take the property from the Black people and still allow them to live there. And sometimes the people who were still living there didn't understand that they didn't own it anymore. That's very common. The fourth way is this thing called the legal dispossession and eminent domain. Huge, 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 huge. So many Black communities destroyed through what they call eminent domain. Urban renewal and infrastructure projects. Cities often seized Black-owned land under eminent domain to build highways, airports, public housing, oftentimes compensating the owners below market value or not at all. We see examples of this everywhere: in Durham, North Carolina, Chicago, Illinois, Charleston, South Carolina, New Orleans. Black neighborhoods were destroyed for highways or redevelopment. Now, let's take a look at how the U.S. highway system systemically spliced and destroyed many Black communities around the country. All right. Let's see. Aaron X. Dunlap said, Assalamu alaikum. Walaikum salam, sir. Very important information. Mr. Earl Graves Sr. of Black Enterprise Magazine dedicated the last years of his life to Black family legacy planning. He said it was a designed plot for the courts to steal wealth, Black wealth, through probate court. Yeah. Yep. Brother Ronald said, I bear witness. Yep. All right. So check this out. I don't know how many of you all realize that in New York, Chicago, Nebraska, Kansas, the inner city, the thriving Black communities, almost all were either completely destroyed, like Black Bottom, Detroit, or divided. So now you got South Side, West Side, North Side by highways. And that was done purposely. All right. So take a look at this video. We're not going to be long today, but I got to share this information with y'all. This is called Racism by Design, the Interstate Highway System. All right, check this out.
Racism by Design, how racism shaped interstate highways. Considered to be essential to the national interest by President Dwight D. Eisenhower, the United States Interstate Highway System became the largest public works program in American history following the passage of the 1956 Federal Aid Highway Act. Over the next 2 decades, more than 40,000 miles of roadways were built to connect nearly every state capital and nearly every city with more than 50,000 people. The act provided funds to states for building through major urban areas with the stated goal of alleviating traffic and better connecting the suburbs with jobs and commercial activity in city downtown areas. Planners of the Interstate Highway System, which began to take shape after the Federal Highway Act was passed, routed some highways directly and sometimes purposefully through Black communities. In some instances, the government took homes by eminent domain. The Federal Highway Act of 1956, which provided funding for the creation of the Interstate Highway System, was a pivotal moment that accelerated the destruction of Black neighborhoods. While this law was designed to improve national infrastructure, it had a disproportionate impact on African American communities. The legislation provided federal funds to cities for highway construction, but local planners often chose to route the highways through poorer, racially segregated areas rather than more affluent white neighborhoods. The construction of inner-city expressways in the mid-20th century often deliberately targeted Black neighborhoods as part of the broader urban renewal policies that prioritized the needs of white communities and businesses over those of African Americans. This practice was not random. There were deliberate decisions by urban planners, politicians, and the federal government to place expressways through predominantly Black neighborhoods, which resulted in the destruction of homes, businesses, and community centers. The construction of expressways, particularly in the mid-20th century, had a devastating impact on many Black communities in the United States. This process, often referred to as highway construction and urban renewal, displaced thousands of African Americans and destroyed vibrant, thriving neighborhoods. The effects were most pronounced in cities like New York, Chicago, and Detroit, where Black communities were disproportionately affected. Courts were striking down the use of racial zoning to keep Black people in certain communities and white people in other communities. So the highway development propped up at the time when the idea of integration in housing was on the horizon. And so very intentionally, highways were sometimes built right on the formal boundary lines that were used during racial zoning. Sometimes community members asked the highway builders to create a barrier between their white community and the encroaching Black communities. To make way for highways, entire neighborhoods were demolished. Many of these neighborhoods were home to African Americans who had settled in central urban areas due to discriminatory housing policies like redlining. Families were forced to relocate, often without adequate compensation or opportunities to find new homes. The 1950s and the 1960s saw a rise in urban renewal programs, which were often euphemisms for removing Black residents from urban centers in favor of new development. These programs were framed as efforts to revitalize cities, but in reality, they often meant the displacement of Black communities to make room for highways, commercial districts, and housing for wealthier, often white residents. Highways were seen as a quick fix for the expansion of the city, and Black neighborhoods were seen as expendable. The development of expressways was often justified by the notion that these areas were blighted and needed to be cleared for progress, despite the fact that these neighborhoods were vibrant and had deep cultural roots. With the building of these routes, people who couldn't leave the area entirely had to find housing and work and rebuild their lives in whatever remained of their neighborhoods. Because the construction and resulting high speed, multi lane highways often isolated communities from economically thriving areas, the new roads and bridges became reinforcements for segregation and the practice of redlining. Robert Moses, who was chairman of the New York City Slum Clearance Committee, said that the highway construction must go right through the cities and not around them. He was a leading proponent of the idea that the best way to eradicate the supposed slums where most Black people lived at that time was to build highways through them. Black-owned businesses and local economies suffered. The construction of expressways disrupted local businesses, many of which were cornerstones of these communities. The displacement of people also led to the loss of employment opportunities for those who relied on those businesses. Black neighborhoods were often home to small businesses, churches, and other institutions that served the local community. The expressways not only disrupted families, but also wiped out these important community assets. Many African American businesses that had survived the challenges of segregation were destroyed, and the displaced business owners had limited resources or opportunities to rebuild elsewhere. Black neighborhoods were often located near major urban centers, which made them prime targets for urban renewal projects like highway construction. Because these neighborhoods were often already economically vulnerable, the government and planners felt that they could easily justify displacing residents. Additionally, many African Americans had fewer financial resources to fight back against these projects. Expressways were often deliberately placed to cut through Black neighborhoods, reinforcing racial segregation. In many cases, highways served as barriers between white and Black communities, exacerbating lives and limiting access to resources like schools, hospitals, and jobs. At the time, many cities were racially segregated, and urban planning decisions reflected these racial divides. Black neighborhoods were often viewed as undesirable or in the way of city growth and development. City planners and government officials made a conscious decision to build expressways through these neighborhoods, believing that these areas had lower property values and were less likely to protest or have the political influence to prevent development. The consequences of highway construction weren't just immediate. They had long-lasting effects on the economic and social fabric of Black communities. The loss of property, businesses, and homes contributed to the cycles of poverty, as displaced families had little recourse to rebuild or reintegrate into a broader city economy. The highways built through Black neighborhoods often isolated them from the rest of the city, further entrenching racial segregation. The highways physically divided communities, making it harder for displaced residents to access schools, jobs, and healthcare. This division compounded the already existing issues of inequality in housing, education, and economic opportunity. Highways bring pollution, noise, and traffic, which are particularly harmful to communities located near them. Black neighborhoods, often targeted for highway construction, were subjected to these environmental risks, leading to long-term health problems for some residents. African American communities were typically underrepresented in local political decision-making processes, and they had little political power to stop or influence urban development projects. The residents of Black neighborhoods were often seen as less politically organized or powerful compared to white communities, making it easier for city leaders to bypass them in favor of expressway construction. This imbalance allowed highway projects to move forward without significant opposition. Black communities that were displaced were often relocated to other areas with similar or worse living conditions, further compounding the negative impacts on their health and well being. The construction of intercity and interstate expressways in the mid 20th century was a deliberate process that disproportionately targeted Black neighborhoods. By routing highways through these communities, city planners, politicians, and the federal government prioritized the interests of white residents and businesses over the well being of African American communities. The result was the destruction of homes, businesses, and social institutions, long term economic hardship, and the physical and social isolation of Black communities. These actions were part of a broader history of systemic racism in urban policy that continues to have lasting effects on Black communities today. Until next time, if you like little known.
All right, builders. Again, like I said, this is for those of us who are builders. I gave this statistic earlier. I'm going to give it to you again, but it may have gone over some of y'all's heads. By 1910, Black Americans owned 15 million acres of land. By 1997, only 2.3 million acres remain. Over 90% of that land is tied to legal loopholes. The Federal Highway Act displaced an estimated, y'all ready for this? 475,000 households during the mid-20th century U.S. highway construction boom, and a disproportionate number of them were Black. Though exact numbers for Black families are not precisely documented nationwide, historical and academic resources indicate that hundreds of thousands of Black homes were impacted. This project funded 41,000 miles of interstate highways, an estimated 1 million people displaced overall. So 475,000 homes, but about 1 million people. Black neighborhoods were disproportionately targeted due to lower political power, legal segregation, and redlining. Urban renewal efforts, often called Negro removal by critics at the time, was a big culprit. While there's no single official national total of Black homes lost, but researchers and historical studies estimate that over 300 Black communities were affected across the United States. Likely tens to thousands of Black homes were lost. Let me give you some examples. Some of these you may be familiar with. You have Miami's Overtown, 10,000 plus residents displaced. Detroit's Black Bottom and Paradise Valley, the entire Black cultural and economic centers destroyed. Nashville's Jefferson Street, divided and gutted a thriving Black business district. New Orleans' Claiborne Avenue, destroyed a key Black commercial and social corridor. Syracuse, New York, 15th Ward, 80 to 90% Black neighborhood wiped out. Atlanta's Sweet Auburn and Buttermilk Bottoms bulldozed for I-75 and 85. Right here in Chicago, according to the Chicago Sun-Times newspaper, the construction of federally funded expressways after the 1956 Federal Aid Highway Act, like the Dan Ryan Expressway, led to the displacement of approximately 81,000 people, of whom about 64% were Black, despite Black residents comprising just 23% of the city's population at the time. The other big expressway, the Eisenhower, cut right through the Black communities, like the near West Side, Garfield Park, East Garfield Park, further displacing thousands and disrupting cohesive neighborhoods. Chicago's highway projects between the late 1950s and mid-1960s forcibly moved tens of thousands from their homes, over 50,000 Black residents among them. This reflected a broader pattern in U.S. urban policy. Highways disproportionately targeted and devastated Black neighborhoods contributing to segregation and deepening the racial wealth gap. So now you see how pooling our resources, meeting, networking, and creating think tanks are important to rebuilding, building, developing, redeveloping our neighborhoods. The proper reparations will be helpful also. Remember, learning to govern ourselves, build and develop communities is critical to our self-development. None of this is possible without engaging in a rigorous self-improvement process. And y'all know, in this circle, we don't hate, we do not contribute to the divide in our community. We don't hate on each other. You won't get that from, we practice in this circle that we're working on and that we're building. We're not competing against each other. We're not trying to hurt anybody or shut each other out. These are all tactics that we practice as a people that we got to stop today. They're going to impact whether or not we can successfully govern ourselves. I can tell you how many times in business where it may be somebody that I don't even really like, but if they're from among my community, I will do what I have to do to make sure that we can get the job done. No competing against each other, no trying to shut one another out. We practice all these tactics that come right up out of the competitive mind of Satan. And then we want to walk right up and say, Black power, sister, brother, assalamu alaikum. No. You're not wishing your brother or sister peace if you're pinching them off from economic development. You don't wish one another peace. You don't even love yourself if you could sit there and be so competitive and hateful and be so one-track minded that you can't even allow someone else to do for self. So we talk about these things on this show. This channel, this network is not for everybody. This is for the builders. This is for the developers. This is for the do-for-selfers. This is for those of us who are ready to lead and govern, and we study these subjects here on the Sajdah channel. Okay, so thank you, Brother Ronald. He said, keep pressing on. I'm going to keep pressing on because there's a certain mindset that we have to have in leadership. And when you see people practicing certain predatory behaviors, certain discriminatory behaviors, especially towards one another, they are not fit for leadership. Not fit for leadership. Tell you one other thing. I have some documents that I'm working on from the Honorable Elijah Muhammad, and I would tell you something. And I've seen this described. I saw Abbas Rasul, the former national secretary, in one of these documents said that the Honorable Elijah Muhammad was one of the most generous persons on the planet. So you can still be generous and offer opportunities and support one another, excuse me, without allowing somebody to run over you. We have to learn from that example. The Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan, such a beautiful hearted person. Wonderful. His love it just billows from him and overtakes you. But he ain't soft. He ain't no punk. You ain't going to run him over. He can still lead. So somehow we think that if we act like Satan, then that makes us fit for leadership. That's not the case. So anyway, y'all, I'm going to get off of here. I'm not going to keep belaboring the point. I just want to remind you all to sign up for the Black Muslim Mixer, June 26th, 6 to 8 p.m. We're going to have a little ice cream. We're going to stand around. We're going to talk. We're going to do a show. We're going to work on your elevator pitch so that you can meet people. And I want you telling folks about it. And again, this is for the leaders. This is for the builders. This is for the developers. This is for the do-for-selfers. If that's not really you, and if you are still really working in another capacity and you ain't feeling it, then it's okay. It's not entertainment. It's not for the faint of heart. It's like preservation work, right? It's tough stuff. And you got to have tough skin. and you got to be ready to put in the hard work in order to get it done. All right. So, okay, family, we'll see you all tomorrow. Let me see. Let me get tomorrow's topic before I go. Hold on one second. Let me tell y'all what we're doing tomorrow. So tomorrow is property assessments. We're going to talk about how property assessments were weaponized throughout history during Reconstruction with Black settlements. We're going to learn about how they're still being weaponized today. This is part of us beginning our strategic planning thinking for separation. All right. We didn't talk enough about it, enough theory. Let's bring the doers together. Let's bring the builders together and let's get it done. Okay. We got it. We got the theory. That's how you learn, right? You learn the theory. You go to, those of us who've been to school, you know, you take a class, you take the theory class. Then sometimes you have a lab. Or those first couple years where you're in your 100 and 200 series classes, it's a lot of theory. When you get into 300, 400 and graduate level, it's going to be more tactical. It's going to be more strategic. It's going to be more critical thinking. All right. So, okay, family, be a friend, tell a friend. Make sure you sign up for financial money psychology, money mindset, Sunday, 7 p.m. Central Time. Use this QR code right here and sign up. We've been having an amazing time on Sunday nights. And I listen, I entrench myself in this stuff. I study every single day. I'm studying business. I'm studying entrepreneurship. I'm studying urban planning. I study real estate development to the point where my algorithms on my YouTube, on my TikTok, on my Instagram, they are all about those things because I'm constantly studying. And I've been doing that since I was probably junior high school. Study every single day. And business, finance, real estate have been a huge subject that I've been studying. So my spirituality is a big part of it. Going back over my study guides, just working on myself. And sometimes you got to just lay low and study, man. Lay low and let the God talk to you. Okay. You don't always got to be in everybody's face. Dial it back some and just go deep and study. And then get ready. And I ask Allah, how do you want to use me? Let me know. All right. So peace and blessings, family. Love you. Support the completion of the Honorable Elijah Muhammad Al's Cash App us, Sajdah Enterprises, Zelle us, wendy100m@gmail.com. Thank you, everyone. I see Sister Sonia in the house. She said, Assalamu alaikum, wa alaikum salam. I see Brother Ronald here. I saw a few of y'all up in here. Brother Aaron, X Dunlap is here. Okay. Welcome, y'all. Okay. Go back, check out the series. This is day 3 of our strategic planning for separation. Again, this is for the builders. This ain't entertainment. This is for the developers. I can sing, but I'm not singing on the show. This is for do-for-selfers, okay? Those who are ready to roll up their sleeves and take the lead and begin to build. All right, family. Love you all. Support the network. Be sure to use Cash App. Because what I also want to get us in the habit of is that we have to support programs like this that are teaching this type of subject matter. I know if we were talking about popular cases, people would be cash apping and those people be getting all kind of money. If we was talking about some form of entertainment or something that didn't require us to do something, there's a lot of support. But when you start talking about historic preservation, separation, doing for self, it's like Allah thrust me into some of the hardest subjects, and I have now given my life to those subjects. So Cash App, support. Okay. All right, family. I'm out of here. Peace and blessings.
The Honorable Elijah Muhammad, who in my judgment is the master historian, taught us that of all our studies, history is the most attractive, and it is best qualified to reward the researcher. History is most attractive. Why should history be most attractive? Because history is the recorded time of the human family in its struggle to overcome obstacles. There is no life that is without struggle. The Holy Quran teaches us that man, meaning man and woman, is made to face difficulties. And after difficulty comes ease. But it is history that guides us through difficulty. For if you know how people who had difficulty yesterday got through, and if your difficulty is somewhat similar, then today we also can get through if we follow the guidance of history. This is why Carter G. Woodson and many of our black giants fought for black people to know our history. Because in not knowing our history, we don't have a guide. And without a guide, we are lost. No wonder the Bible